Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Tabe Burka Uraga, natural processed Ethiopia from Datura Coffee. There's the box right there. And Datura, based out of Paris, France. And they've quickly become one of our most featured European coffee roasters on this channel, and that is because Airworks does bring them in quite often. And as a result, we do have our pick of coffees that we want to review from them. And given that we did have some good success with their natural processed coffees in the past, I decided to go ahead and purchase yet another one. So it'll be interesting to see how this coffee turned out. This right here is day 58. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe at a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the Chemex, which does indicate a more medium grind. Roast profile for this coffee. Interestingly enough, this is one of the less light versions of one of the coffees we've had from Datura to date, as I do know that Datura was transitioning from the Loring to the Stronghold, or at least that's what I had heard, and there were some issues with some of their coffees. I don't know if this is one that they did have some issues with, but it did feel just a slight bit more robust than we'd had from them based off some of the other coffees in the past. That being said, I wouldn't say that it was too drastic or that noticeable, but even then, it's on the lighter side of things, maybe slightly more moderately light as opposed to what we've had from them in the past. With all that out of the way, let's go and start discussing this coffee. Day 29, first impression. So we did wait 4 weeks, opted for the V60, and the coffee was just a little bit heavier and more robust than we've come to expect from them, as it did have a little bit more fermentiness to it and plenty of the expected heavier berry qualities as well. Plenty of intensity, as it definitely felt like some adjustments were needed to improve the clarity, but for the most part I can say that it was a decent first impression. Generally speaking, when it comes to Datura's natural processed coffees, we have found them to be cleaner, and that's why they actually have some of my favorite natural processed coffees of any coffee roaster that we do review regularly on this channel. So I do have a lot of optimism. People assume that I don't like natural processed coffees, but I just want my natural processed coffees to be cleaner, and given that they usually have been cleaner with this coffee roaster, it felt like the safer choice, but not necessarily the first experience we had on this one. Day 32 through the Chemex, and the coffee is better, as it does feel a little less robust, as it's offering a cleaner berry quality that's in line with the listed blueberry scents. In addition to that, it's darker toned overall, fully expected, with some sweeter citric qualities to complement it and some stone fruit characteristics as well. So improved this second time around, definitely seeing an abundance of fruit qualities as fully expected with a natural Ethiopian coffee. Day 35 through the FO brewer, and the coffee is significantly toned down in comparison to some of the earlier days, which does make for an interesting trade-off, as it doesn't have a particularly well-defined quality to it, so nothing that stood out too much. However, with notably less of the fermentiness and heaviness, that did seem to allow for the sweeter citrus to be a bit more prominent, but otherwise slightly more plain in general, not necessarily my favorite experience we'd had up to this point. Day 38 through the V60 with Datura's recipe, which is a 14.2:1 at 93 degrees Celsius, and the coffee is expectedly berry forward, offering primarily a focus on the listed blueberry qualities. So one of the main reasons I was picking up this coffee to begin with was because I did want it to have a very blueberry bomb sort of experience. I mean, I saw the blueberry notes listed on here, and that's definitely what I was hoping for. While it's not particularly heavy or fermenty, it's also not necessarily that well defined, as it does offer a pretty straightforward experience. However, there's not a lot of depth to it. It's a little bit more generic of a slightly cleaner berry quality, so mixed impressions this time around. We'll go ahead and move on to day 44, as we opted for the Chemex with the same adjustments, and the coffee was a bit more tame than expected in comparison to some of the earlier experiences. Focus does continue to remain on the listed berry qualities to it, with a solid level of cleanliness, but at the cost of the expected level of sweetness and intensity. So this coffee has been a little bit inconsistent. Granted, we have been tinkering with it and adjusting it quite a bit, but as a result, it hasn't necessarily felt like the easiest coffee to work with, largely because it just seemed to dip here and there based off the experiences that we'd had. Day 47 through the V60 with our standard recipe, and the coffee was back to being one of the better experiences that we had, as there were more fruit characteristics to it. So we felt like we needed to push this coffee just a little bit more. Toning this one down seemed to have a drastic effect and result. So as a result, we continued to push it a little bit more. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Again, perfumey, dark florality with a bit of some red berry qualities to it as well. Kind of mixed impression on this day, truth be told. Day 51 through the Chemex with our standard recipe, and it was a really surprising day. There was a pretty significant, I want to say, resurgence to this coffee, but truth be told, it felt like this coffee just took a very positive shift, as it was the best defined it had been to this point while still offering the most amount of intensity to it, offering more of the floral presentation as well with a little bit of a citric grain quality to it. And it's so strange the way that this coffee just shifted from day 47 to day 51. So for what it's worth, I would say that it is worth giving this coffee, let's see here, so that would be 7 weeks worth of rest before this coffee really seemed to open up to the extent that I was hoping and expecting it to. But as of that 7-week mark, for whatever reason, it just seemed to shift, as on day 55 and here again on day 58. We opted for the Chemex with our standard recipe, and it's excellent. Again, it's highlighted by great cleanliness for a natural, offering a very well-defined berry trait that's in line with the illicit blueberry. So it's pretty close to the blueberry bomb that I was expecting. Also a bit of the strawberry and a cleaner grape. Now, usually when I associate a coffee with a darker grape characteristic, it's because it's pretty heavy. This one, not as heavy as I might have expected. Cleaner dark florality as well, offering a lighter peach plum quality and some honeyed sweetness to it. So a lot of depth in this coffee, which is interesting given earlier days I was complaining that it had little to no depth, but it just goes to show that maybe some patience and some tinkering, you can get a coffee to turn out pretty nice the way you were expecting. All right, so let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have quite a few level 4s. Let's go through those. We'll just start with the cleanliness, level 4. Level 4 cleanliness for pretty much any natural processed coffee is automatically a win. So having it be on the cleaner side of naturals is once again a win, and it does continue to reinforce my sentiment that Datura has some of my favorite natural processed coffees out there. So credit to them once again. Anytime you're able to get a natural coffee to a level 4 these days, I'm automatically going to be happy with the way that it turned out. Finish, level 4. Finish isn't too heavy, it isn't too overbearing, and that's also a win when it comes to natural processed coffees. But even if it did score with level 5, it's cleaner, so I don't mind that whatsoever. A lot of the expected heavier, I shouldn't say heavier, but berry qualities, I mean, this is always going to be a very berry forward coffee throughout the entirety. So level 4, definitely justified. Sweetness, level 4. A lot of fruit sweetness in a number of different directions. So these citric qualities were sweeter. The stone fruit characteristics, which were also a bit abundant at times within this coffee, sweeter. Honeyed sweetness to it, but primarily, of course, the berry qualities offering a sweeter, more, berry sense to it. Level 4, definitely the best place to put that. Florality, level 4. I don't know. I assume that they have some generic floral descriptor on there. Yeah, they do. And that doesn't really come as a surprise given that it has a lot of those, perfumey floral qualities to it, violets, jasmine, that sort of characteristic, but it's not to the point where it takes away from the cleanliness whatsoever. Surprisingly well defined for being a natural in that sense. So very happy with the florals in this coffee. Berry fruit, level 4. Blueberry and strawberry are two of the first descriptors that they have on this coffee. So I don't think anybody's really surprised by it. It's not a truly clean blueberry bomb by what people associate with a blueberry bomb to be, but it's still better than the vast majority of natural Ethiopian coffees we do review that brand themselves or advertise themselves as blueberry forward. Stone fruit, level 4. Perhaps a little generous. I could definitely see some of those lighter peach plum characteristics to it, so it reminds me a little bit more of a yellow plum, kind of the initial Ruby Vatian that we had reviewed from Coffea Circular a number of years ago. I think that's probably the yellow fruits that they're associating within this coffee. So level 4, where we opted to put that. It might also be the citric fruit qualities, which does have a little bit of a sweeter citric sense to it. So thinking tangerine, even thinking a little bit of a pineapple, which is why we opted to put that there at the level 3 mark. Acidity, level 3. Kind of a big win for me. Natural processed Ethiopian coffees can tend to skew on an uneven brightness scale, but this one right here, pretty even brightness to this one, so happy with that. And then the final thing worth discussing, we have the body, level 3. That may be the biggest anomaly in this tasting wheel, as it's an Ethiopian coffee and it's brewed with the Chemex. So in theory, you'd expect it to be maybe a little lighter body than it turned out, but level 3 is fine. It just adds a little bit more depth to this coffee. So outside of that, yeah, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it is a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I really can't remember the first natural Ethiopia that we did review from them. Going into this review, I actually looked up to see how many other coffees we'd reviewed from them, and I saw that the first one we reviewed was a natural Ethiopian coffee. That did turn out to be pretty nice, but this one was pretty nice as well. And then the other is that natural Panamanian coffee that we reviewed from them, which also turned out cleaner than the average natural Panamanian coffee. So I'm going to continue to go back to Datura and their natural processed coffees as long as we continue to have success with them. In comparison to the vast majority of naturals, I've already said this one was better. It felt cleaner, better defined. You got a lot of the pretty prominent fruit qualities within this one throughout the entirety. So as long as it's hitting at that level 4 for cleanliness, I'm going to be happy with the way that the coffee turned out. But just add the fact that it was sweeter, more floral, and plenty of fruit qualities, then it's going to be a win. Not my favorite natural this year, but it's definitely one of the more enjoyable ones that I've had as well. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. If you've also had great success with Datura's natural processed coffees, then I feel like this one is a pretty nice fit in that regard. I think I heard somebody describe this coffee as being reminiscent of candy, like Gushers or something like that. I can see that. It's pretty sweet. It's got a lot of the darker qualities to it that you'd expect, all being presented in a cleaner sense. So that's kind of the best direction I can point somebody towards on this one, and also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Tabe Burka Uraga, natural processed Ethiopia from Datura Coffee. Thanks for watching.